we've been talking mostly about playing, keyboarding, and the Janko, so we're narrowing it down. We've been talking about keyboarding, then Janko. Now let's talk about the Lippens, which is what I've got in front of me, and I've had it for a few weeks. First of all, I love the way this thing sounds. I mean, Mr. Lippens chose this awesome chip. You know, I'm not an engineering guy, so you're not going to hear engineering terms from me. Whoever chose this, you know, this. This thing just sounds gorgeous. And it's real balanced because on one hand it has this uptown, classy, grand piano sound. And at the same time it's got kind of this downtown, almost upright kind of sound. So it can handle light, airy touch. If you want to do cocktail piano, this thing is born to do that. And if you want to get down and kind of crunchy and funky, this thing can handle that as well. The dynamic range of this instrument, I mean, this thing really can handle, you know, real touch, you know, like. This is a keyboard that says to you, if you've got more, I can handle more. You know, hit me harder. I'm not going to break. That's what I really like about this thing. Which brings me to another thing I want to say is, I mean, by God, this thing is sturdy. I'm hoping that when they get to manufacturing, they're going to build it just like this prototype, because this thing, I mean, this gets thrown a lot around in the gear world, this expression, but this thing really is built like a tank. I'm always looking for a piece of gear that's going to grow with me, because I've had bad experiences, and you know, and not to get too much into the money thing and how much gear costs, but you got to talk about that, because they're going to come out with this thing and it's going to have a price point, and if that price point is too expensive, people are going to say, oh, I can't afford that, they've priced it out of my range. But I'm going to say this, I've learned this about gear over the years, and it's the only gear I ever regret getting is the gear I spent too little on. The gear I said, you know what, it's $100 and I don't need a lot, it's just going to do the job. That cheap gear is the gear I outgrow within a year. That's the gear I end up selling, or it's the gear I end up putting in the closet and not using. But I remember my first big purchase. I mentioned the Roland XP50. I bought that unit in 1997, and that's the first professional grade piece of gear I ever got. I was a first-year graduate student in the University of Miami. I was broke, but I knew I needed new sounds, and so I spent $1,100, which back then was more than it is now. I spent $1,100 on credit for the Roland XP50, and I had such buyer's remorse in the weeks and months after I bought it. I said, I can't afford this. Why did I get this piece of equipment? But man, I tell you, that piece of gear grew with me when I needed to learn how to play keys. When I started noodling around with keys and watching Scott the Piano Guy in 2003, I had already had the Roland XP50. When I needed to sequence, I made 3 different albums with the Roland XP50 as that keyboard as the sequencing center of my studio. I eventually sold it in 2010, not because I was tired of it, just, you know, by then I had moved to DAWs for sequencing, but I had that instrument for 13 years and I never outgrew it. And so if you do the math, okay, $1,100 was a lot of money, but spread that out over 13 years, it comes to less than $100 a year. So a good piece of gear that keeps you locked in and keeps you playing it day after day, week after week, year after year, eventually more than pays for itself. I'm going to go on a limb and say, if they build it as sturdy as this prototype, it's going to be a bargain at any price, because I can see this being the centerpiece of somebody's setup for 10, 15, 20 years. It's meant to be played every day, and it's just that you know how instruments feel when you sink into something. You're like, okay, this thing is for real. This is a professional grade thing. I'm going to have this for a while. That's how the Lippens Keyboard feels. I consider myself a voice in the Janko community. My credibility would be on the line if I didn't give you guys the good, the bad, everything. You know, so I'm just going to tell you what I think about this instrument after having it a few weeks. I've told you some pros. Cons are, it is heavy, it is bulky. I don't think it fits super well on my particular desk. I've had it for a few weeks now, so I'm getting used to seeing it there. I have a very small project studio, so space matters. So yeah, it feels huge. It's heavy. I don't know if this could get addressed before they go to production, but if they could shave off a few inches in the depth, it would be easier to place just about anywhere. Then again, you know, if you bought yourself a grand piano, you'd be wondering, you know, do I have space for it? The octave span, right, in this current prototype I have now, Mr. Lippens tells me that they have the ability to adjust the octave span, and that right now this is on the wider end possible octave spans. So the way this particular iteration is, if the reason why you transitioned or want to transition from traditional keyboard to Janko is octave span, you've got small hands, or you've always felt regular pianos just too big, this particular iteration won't be the solution to your problems. The Lippens folks will have to make this a little bit narrower so that you feel you've got an edge over traditional piano. Just in the 2 weeks that I've had it, I've already gotten used to the octave span, just like that, and I knew I would, because I know how human beings are. We adjust to stuff. Gotten used to the action on it. This is a weighted action, and I always say I'm going to avoid playing a weighted keyboard. I never felt weighted keys were comfortable. I always felt like I was working too hard just to play them. But here I am a few weeks later, and I love the action on this. I love the action. This particular prototype, Mr. Lippens told me that he lightened up the action because he knows I'm into unweighted keys, but it's still heavier than weighted keys. And just in a few weeks I've had it, the action's perfect to me. It has sort of a bounce to it. It bounces back at you. I've been asked to put together what I'd like to see. This is my personal wish list. One, I want to see some classic MIDI in, MIDI out ports on it. Right now it has a USB, which is fine. That'll allow you to interact with a DAW. And me, I like classic MIDI ports. I like with a standard $5 MIDI cable. You know, I plug from the out on here onto the in on say my Novation Bass Station 2, and boom, I'm controlling Novation from here. You know, and the other thing I'd like to see is, okay, this is so, I don't even know if this is possible from an engineering standpoint. This is truly might just be fantasy. I'd love to see some knob, like on the right side of it or on the left side of it, where you could in real time actually adjust how weighted the keyboard is. That's probably not possible from an engineering perspective, or it's maybe I'm a few decades ahead of myself. But if I could, I would love to be able to say, I'm going to practice hand-in today, and hand-in strengthens my fingers more when the keys are heavier and give me more resistance. Crank up the weight and practice hand-in to strengthen my fingers with a harder keyboard. Because just in the few weeks I've had it, my fingers have had to grow stronger because I've never played it. I've never played weighted keys. So and I didn't like it before, but now I like it because I feel my fingers getting stronger. So I wish I had that. I'd love for it to have that ability somewhere down the road. And my last wish list item is, I positively need like 2 or more convincing Fender Rhodes patches. I love the piano sound on this, but if it had one Fender Rhodes patch that was kind of hard and percussive, that type sound, and then a real light, airy, flaky kind of Fender Rhodes to do glissandos and arpeggios, with 2 great convincing Rhodes patches, I would be completely in love. You just lock me in here with the Lippens, and I'll come out with an album. So there we go. You asked me about my musical background, and I eventually came around to Janko and to Lippens, and there you go. I hope this has blessed somebody. Take care.